I didn't realize I was being played until the night I caught her slipping my tip money into her apron, smiling at me like we were still friends. Up until that second, I thought I was just tired, too sensitive, maybe bad at my job. I work at a little family restaurant off a highway exit, the kind of place with vinyl booths and a giant plastic cow on the roof. We do a lot of regulars, truckers, and families coming back from ball games. Nothing fancy. I've been there 5 years. Morning prep, double shifts when someone calls out, wiping down ketchup crust from menus. That's my normal. The staff is small, so everyone knows everyone's business. You either become a weird little family or you start quietly hating each other. When Jess got hired, I honestly thought she was going to be my first real friend there. She was all bright smile, loud laugh, big hoop earrings, and everyone seemed to like her right away. She started on slow weekday nights shadowing me. I showed her how to ring in modifiers, where the extra syrup was, which regulars wanted extra ice without asking. At first, she was sweet, almost overly grateful. "Thank God you're here," she'd say. "You're like the only one who actually helps." It felt good to hear that, especially when you're used to being background noise. I'd cover her side work, double-check her orders, and tell her the tricks I'd had to learn the hard way. The first little weird thing I noticed was the schedule board. I'd ask our manager, Doug, if I could pick up a Saturday, and he'd shrug and say, "Jess already called it." That didn't bother me much at first. She was new, probably trying to make rent, and I remember what that panic feels like. Then, I started seeing my name scratched out. More Saturday nights, more decent Friday shifts suddenly had her handwriting over mine, her initials circled. One time I asked Doug about it. He blinked at the board and goes, "Didn't you text me you needed those nights off?" I hadn't. But Jess was standing right behind me, tying her apron, and she just gave me this quick, almost pitying look before busying herself with salt shakers. That's when I started second-guessing myself. Maybe I had said something about needing a break. Maybe I was mixing up conversations. Little things kept piling up. A table would wave at me, saying, "Hey, can we get more ranch?" And Jess would swoop in, laugh, and say, "Sorry, she's a bit overwhelmed today," like I wasn't standing there. We were supposed to keep our own sections, but she'd drift into mine whenever big tippers came in. "Let me help you out," she'd say, grabbing menus and sliding right into my booth like she owned it. When the check came, she'd tell the table, "You can leave it with me, I'm taking care of her tonight." Half the time, I didn't see those tips again. If I asked, she'd tilt her head and say, "Babe, they barely left anything, don't worry about it." Then she'd act offended that I even questioned her. The cooks weren't much help. In the kitchen, she'd crack jokes, mock my forgetfulness, and they'd all laugh because she made the room light, and I made it quiet. One day, Doug pulled me aside and asked if everything was okay at home. He said Jess had mentioned I'd been off my game and snapping at customers. I don't snap at customers. I swallow my irritation and apologize if their fries aren't hot enough, even when they're wrong. I walked around with this knot in my chest after that. Every mistake, a missed side, a ticket rung in wrong. I wondered if I'd actually done it, or if someone said I did. Jess stayed close, though. She'd loop her arm through mine on slow nights and say, "We're a team, okay? I've got your back." She'd say it right after Doug chewed me out for something I didn't remember doing. Her voice always sounded like a blanket and a knife at the same time. I started dreading work, which sucked because that restaurant was my main source of stability. Rent, car insurance, groceries, all hanging on whether I could keep those shifts. Still, I kept telling myself I was overreacting. Nobody wants to believe someone's slowly turning everyone against them while smiling in their face. The night everything really began to click, we were slammed with a bus of high school kids. Jess somehow ended up with most of the tables, even though half of them were in my section. I ran drinks, grabbed baskets, refilled sodas for her tables, while she joked around and acted like I was her assistant. At the end of the rush, she handed me a couple crumpled singles and said, "Here, you're cut." That's when something in my brain finally pushed back. It was like a tiny clear voice under all the noise saying, This isn't a misunderstanding. I went home that night with aching feet and maybe $20 to show for it. I lay awake on my old couch, staring at the ceiling, replaying every small, harmless thing she'd done. Taken alone, they were nothing. Together, they started to look like a pattern. I didn't have proof, and I still kind of hated myself for even thinking of her as the problem. But somewhere between the humming fridge and the neighbor's TV, bleeding through the wall, I realized I couldn't just keep letting it slide. I just didn't know yet how much worse it was going to get. Things shifted from weird to bad a couple weeks later. It happened so slowly that if I tell it out of order, it sounds dramatic. Living it felt like being nibbled to death by tiny, invisible piranhas. Jess started helping me by taking over my tables whenever I went to the back. I'd run to grab extra ranch or a side of pickles, come back out, and she'd be leaning on my booth, all smiles, chatting like they were her regulars. "You were in the weeds," she'd say afterward, patting my arm. "I didn't want you to drown." But I wasn't drowning. I was doing what I've always done, moving slow but steady, keeping track of my own system. The first time I saw the money difference clearly was on a Friday. I had 4 tables, all pretty solid, and I mentally added up at least $40 in my head from what they'd said they'd leave. When we cashed out, somehow I only had 22. Jess, who'd complained all night about dead tables, walked out with over 100. "You know you can claim less for taxes," she whispered when I stared at my slip. "You don't have to be so honest." I just nodded, but my stomach felt weird. I knew I hadn't miscounted that badly. Then there were the mistakes that suddenly belonged to me. Food sent back, drinks made wrong, checks mixed up. Doug would call my name from the kitchen door, his voice sharp. "Why is table 6 saying they never got their appetizer?" I'd swear I hadn't even taken table 6. Then I'd see Jess in the corner, biting her lip like she felt bad for me, telling him quietly, "I think she just forgot. She's been exhausted lately." She always said it like she was defending me, like she was the only one who noticed I was struggling. Co-workers started checking in on me. "Hey, you okay? Jess said you've got a lot going on." I don't talk about my personal life at work, so whatever lot she was describing was something she made up. The final straw on the "Am I crazy?" pile came from a regular couple, Mark and Denise. They always sat in my section, always chatted about their grandkids, always tipped in cash. One night, Mark waved me over as they were leaving. "Sorry we couldn't sit with you tonight," he said. "We asked Jess where you were, and she said you were too overwhelmed, so she'd handle us." I hadn't been overwhelmed. I'd been stocking napkins. After they left, I went to the side station and just stood there, holding a stack of cups until my hands started shaking. That little voice in my head wasn't tiny anymore. Jess must have seen something in my face because she followed me back there. "Hey, what's wrong?" she asked, all concern. "I thought Mark and Denise were my table," I said. It came out more fragile than I wanted. She sighed, like I was exhausting. "Babe, you can't get so territorial. You were behind. I was just helping. You're making this weird." Then she tilted her head. "Unless you don't want my help anymore?" It was a trap, and I knew it. Say yes, and I'd confirm her whole, overwhelmed and ungrateful story. Say no, and she'd keep walking all over me. I backed down. "I appreciate it," I muttered. "I just got confused." She smiled, big and bright. "That's my girl," she said, giving my shoulder a squeeze. I went home that night furious at myself. I scrubbed dried sauce off my work shoes in the sink, hands shaking, and kept replaying her words in my head. That weekend, I overheard the conversation that finally snapped something in me. I came in early for my Sunday shift and heard voices in Doug's office, door half shut. "Look, I don't want to get her in trouble," Jess was saying, all soft. "But she's been short on her drawer a few times, and I'm worried she'll blame me." My heart dropped. My drawer had never been short, not once in 5 years. Doug sighed. "Yeah, I've noticed mistakes picking up. I'll keep an eye on it." "She's sweet," Jess added quickly. "She just gets confused. I think she's stressed. I've been covering for her with customers. I backed up so fast, I almost tripped over a mop bucket. The room tilted for a second. It wasn't paranoia. She wasn't just stealing tips or shifts. She was building a version of me in their heads. Incompetent, unstable, grateful that she was there to clean up after me. During my shift, every time Doug glanced my way, I imagined what he was thinking now. Every time Jess touched my arm or joked with me in front of others, it felt like a hand on a marionette string. At the end of the night, she leaned over my side of the server station, close enough that I could smell her perfume. "You good?" she asked, smiling. "Oh, I told Doug I don't mind picking up your slack. We're a team." Something in me just went still. The anger stopped buzzing and settled into something cold and clear. I smiled back at her, small and tight. "Yeah," I said. "We're a team." That was the exact moment I decided I was done being the confused, grateful one. If she wanted a story about me, I was going to give her one she didn't write. Once I made the decision, everything got quieter in my head. Not calmer, just clearer. I stopped reacting and started watching. If Jess wanted to build a story about me, I needed one about her, but mine would be the truth. The first thing I did was tighten up my own work. I double-checked every order, counted every bill in my drawer twice, took pictures of my completed side work with timestamps. Nothing dramatic, just quiet, boring consistency. Then I paid attention to where Jess drifted and what she touched. She moved like someone who expected the world to rearrange around her. Quick, casual, confident, and sloppy once you knew where to look. The tip skimming was the easiest to track. Whenever she picked up my checks, to help, I started noting the table numbers in my phone. Later, when those customers left, I'd ask them something friendly on their way out. "Hey, thank you so much. Hope everything was okay tonight?" Most of them would smile and say something like, "We left it on the table," or "Hope you got the tip, you deserve it." But I hadn't gotten anything, and I didn't call them out. I just walked to the bus tub, look at the empty table, and quietly document it. Next, I watched the schedule board. Every time my name got scratched out, I took a photo. Every time Doug thought I'd asked for a night off, I logged it. I didn't confront anyone, not yet. The turning point came one night when the dinner rush hit hard. We were short-staffed. The grill cook was in a bad mood, and tickets backed up fast. A six-top in my section ordered all at once: burgers, melts, sides, a mess of modifiers. I rang it in carefully and repeated the order twice. 20 minutes later, Jess walked out of the kitchen, holding their tray. "Don't worry, I fixed your ticket," she said loud enough for 3 other servers to hear. "You rung the whole thing wrong." I hadn't. And when the food hit the table, 2 orders were wrong, but not the ones I'd entered. The dad of the group held up the receipt. "This isn't even what we got," he said. Jess jumped in before I opened my mouth. "She mixed up the order," Jess said softly, touching his shoulder. "I'll take care of it." I took a breath so deep it hurt, because that was the moment she slipped. Really slipped. I still had the original ticket in my apron. I still had the timestamp and my own handwriting. And now I had 2 witnesses, the table and the line cook, who shouted, "I made what was on the screen." I didn't correct her. I didn't defend myself. I just quietly fixed the orders, delivered them, apologized to the family, and moved on. That night, while Jess laughed with a busser and told him some wild version of what happened, I sat in my car and organized everything I'd collected. Photos, notes, receipts, times, patterns. It wasn't revenge yet. It was preparation. The restaurant had one rule Jess never respected: don't clock in early without permission. She did it constantly to grab better tables, so I added that to the list. Times, dates, witnesses. Then came the moment I'd been waiting for. A Saturday night with a 4-hour wait line out the door. The kind of crowd that tipped big and complained bigger. Jess swooped into my section 3 times before appetizers even hit. I stayed calm. I wrote down every table she pocketed. I watched her slide cash into her apron and walk straight past the register. Near closing, she tried to pull the same stunt as always, leaning on the counter, talking loud enough for Doug to hear. "She's overwhelmed again," she said. "You know I love helping, but she's slipping." I didn't flinch. I didn't argue. I didn't defend. Instead, I waited until the last customer left, and while Jess was rolling silverware, I walked up to Doug with my folder of notes. "Hey," I said quietly, "can I show you something?" He looked tired, suspicious, maybe already bracing for drama. But I opened the folder and laid everything out. The schedules, the missing tips, the original tickets, the table notes, the photos of my untouched side work, her early clock-ins, the discrepancies in her claimed tips versus mine. Doug didn't say a word for a long minute. Then he muttered, "Jesus Christ." I didn't sugarcoat anything, and I didn't exaggerate. I told him plainly what I'd seen, and what customers had told me, and how long it had been going on. He rubbed his forehead like he was getting a migraine. "Why didn't you say something sooner?" "She always got to you first," I said. "I didn't want to come in here without proof." Another long pause. Then he nodded once. "Come in tomorrow," he said. "We're going to sort this out." Jess had no idea the trap had already closed. She'd built her little story brick by brick. But I'd been building one too. And mine didn't fall apart when someone poked it. The next day, I showed up 10 minutes early and sat in my car until my shift started. I didn't want Jess seeing me walk in with purpose. I needed her relaxed, still believing she owned the space between every table. Doug called us both into the office before the lunch rush. Jess bounced in like she was about to get praised for something. She even did that little shoulder squeeze she saved for moments she wanted to look supportive. Doug didn't smile. He didn't even look at her. He closed the door, sat down, and said, "We need to talk about some discrepancies." Her whole expression flickered. First confusion, then cautious concern. She shot me a glance like I'd better play along with whatever she thought was happening. Then Doug laid out the first sheet of evidence. And the next. And the next. Every photo, every time-stamped note, every contradicted claim, every stolen table and tip. Jess's face went pale, then red, then pale again. She tried to talk fast, like she always did. "Doug, no, she's confused. She's been stressed. She must have mixed things up. I never—" But Doug held up a hand. "Jess, I already talked to the customers she claimed complained. None of them said what she told me." She froze. Actually froze. "And," he continued, "your clock-ins don't match your scheduled times. Accounting noticed the pattern." She shook her head hard, grasping at air. "I was helping. She's been slipping and I didn't want her to get fired, so I covered. She must be twisting this." Doug turned to me. "You have anything else you want to add?" I didn't go on a speech. I didn't cry or yell or finally unload the months of frustration. I just said, "I want to do my job without being lied about." That was it. Simple, true. Jess whipped toward me, eyes wide. "Are you kidding me? After everything I did for you?" Something in me loosened. A knot I didn't even know had been tied that tight. For the first time, I didn't feel small in that room. I just felt done. Doug folded his hands. "Jess, go wait outside." She opened her mouth to argue, but his voice shifted. That no-nonsense tone he only used during fire inspections or when the fryer broke. She left. He let out a long breath once the door closed. "I'm sorry you had to deal with that," he said. "I'll handle the rest." And he did. Jess was taken off the schedule pending review, which is restaurant speak for, "You're not coming back." 2 days later, her apron and name tag were shoved into a plastic bag by the office door. When word spread among the staff, it was like someone had cut a puppet string. The kitchen got quieter. Tables stopped getting reassigned. No one asked if I was overwhelmed. One of the bussers admitted he'd always felt uneasy about how she talked about me. Another server apologized for believing her over me. I didn't gloat. I didn't need to. The atmosphere shifted back to normal. A tired, ketchup-sticky normal, but normal all the same. I got my regular weekends back. My sections stopped magically shrinking. Customers I hadn't seen in weeks asked where I'd been hiding. The first Saturday after she was gone, Mark and Denise came in and waved me over. "We missed you," Denise said, squeezing my hand. "Glad you're back to yourself." I didn't explain anything. I just smiled, took their order, and felt something like air returning to a room. It wasn't dramatic. No shouting match, no restaurant-wide showdown. Just the truth, finally, louder than her stories. A week later, I cleaned out my locker and found a sticky note Jess had written months ago. "You're doing great, babe. Don't be so hard on yourself." I almost laughed. Not because it was funny, but because of how transparent it looked now. A little pat on the head disguised as kindness. I threw it away without a second thought. Here's what I learned. In the painfully slow way, life likes to teach things. Most manipulators don't need to scream or break anything. They just need you to doubt your own footing while they quietly move the ground. But once you stop stumbling and actually look at where you're standing, the whole act falls apart. They rely on your silence, not your weakness. These days, my shifts feel lighter. I breathe easier. I move through the aisles without waiting for someone to grab the narrative out from under me. And every time a coworker says, "You okay?" it's because they mean it, not because someone whispered that I wasn't. As for Jess, I don't know where she ended up. I don't need to. My revenge wasn't ruining her life. It was simply refusing to let her keep rewriting mine.